And we're back with another episode of The State of Pro Wrestling. It's Gerald Glassford coming right back at you here from the State of Pro Wrestling, the pop culture cosmos, inside sports, fantasy football, game source, all those great things that I do. Please go ahead and like and subscribe whenever you can. That 5-star review is so magical, and it means so much to us right here. All that good stuff. And if you have anyone out there in your life that loves pop culture, just tell them, hey, there's a few good shows like the Pop Culture Cosmos and the PVD Cast that are waiting for you.
That's right.
Go ahead and listen to every week right there for you on radio stations worldwide for me, and also podcast outlets for the both of us, the PVD Cast and the Pop Culture Cosmos. But it wouldn't be the State of Pro Wrestling without my tag team partner tagging him in. It is, of course, a good man indeed. You got to go ahead and check out what he's doing today at the PVD Cast. Plus, so funny because he's on a wrestling show with me. He talks wrestling on the PVD Cast, yet his other show is called Mat Talk, but it's not about being on the mat. Not that kind of mat. It is, of course, John Orlando. John, great to have you here as always. I've always wanted to say that to you, my friend. I'm like, Mat Talk. The guy talks pro wrestling, but Mat Talk is not about pro wrestling.
Yeah, and I think that we had one person confused one time on our Facebook page. They were very confused because they were asking questions about amateur wrestling. And I'm like, sir, maybe you didn't read the description. This is a Matlock podcast. So I think that gentleman was a little bit perturbed at us. We'll leave it at that. He was probably not a happy camper with myself and Jason, my partner. But anyways, it's great to be back on the PCC, and I'm looking forward to our one homework assignment, if you want to call it that. I'll tell you right now, folks, I put in a lot of effort and put in a lot of hours for this assignment, and I'm looking forward to talking about it with you, Gerald, and of course all the other tidbits that we have going on in the world of pro wrestling.
Well, you can always throw these shows up on your channel because you're always going on vacations. You're like going here to and there. I always hear like you're going here, there, everywhere. Mazatlan. Then I hear, like Rome, Paris, going here. So you can always go ahead and throw this in as filler for the PVD Cast if you ever need it, my friend, because that's always yours. You're one half of the best tag team out there in podcasting.
That's right.
Absolutely. So I know one thing you said you wanted to put up on the pvdcast.com is our thoughts on the history of pro wrestling announcers. And we'll have our list of pro wrestling announcers, most of them anyways. I know some people will call us out, well, why didn't you have this guy? Or why didn't you have that guy? You know what? We have voted on, I think, I don't know. Let me count here.
I want to say there was 40. Yeah 40 something.
40 something. Yeah, 40 something that we did. That's a pretty dang good list. So we're going to go ahead and break down a lot of it here coming up on the back end of the show. Plus also as well, I will ask John Orlando the biggest question in professional wrestling. And he has absolutely no idea what that is. So I'm going to go ahead and ask him here in a few minutes. Plus, we will go ahead and reminisce, if we can, to the 35th anniversary. The Ringer actually had a good article on it. The 35th anniversary of the feud in World Championship Wrestling of Ric Flair and Terry Funk. We'll talk about that on the road as well, as far as myself and how I relate to that particular feud. So we'll talk about that on the show as well. But first, my friend, it is an important month in August. It's two of the biggest shows of the year. At least for one company, it is the biggest show of the year. And for another, it's I'd probably say the number 3 show of the year for them. It is, of course, AEW's All In and WWE's SummerSlam. They'll be taking place in the month of August. things are starting to line up as of when we are recording today. It's not finalized on either account, but we can get a good idea on exactly the main matches to talk about. That's something we'll go ahead and do right now. Which one for you first, my friend? AEW or WWE?
Let's talk AEW.
Okay, absolutely. Coming off the, I have to say, the best match of the year I have seen. It has replaced the Will Ospreay Josh Alexander match I saw in January, and it has replaced some of the other Will Ospreay matches. I did get to see the 1 hour or almost 1 hour, 59 minutes, 58-second classic between MJF and Will Ospreay. I still think by a smidgen because the ending was just so awesome on MJF, Bryan Danielson. I think that was a teeny bit better, but this one for me is the best match of the year. They are looking like they're going to have a rematch. I love the promo that MJF did the other day in regards to trying to change the international title into an American title. I questioned loudly, John, that they did this. They showed their first time against each other on Dynamite, on free TV, on the 250th episode. I kind of questioned it. I also questioned the fact that they are not challenging each other for the world title. I still think that that's a miss by AEW. I think that if you're trying to gain a foothold on the audience, I think Will Ospreay coming after and getting the world title in London would have been the smartest move. Maybe that's for next year, but who knows what the company will be like this time next year. Your thoughts, my friend, on the marquee matchup. And the fact is that we're talking about this matchup even more so than their world champion. Again, Swerve Strickland seems to be pushed off to the side yet again because this angle, this feud, this matchup has been just so good.
Swerve Strickland is the equivalent of Rodney Dangerfield in professional wrestling. He gets no respect.
No respect.
None. And let's just not, let's not fool anybody out there. His opponent at All In is a pretty darn good guy himself in the ring. And that, of course, is Bryan Danielson. Mm-hmm. So that's going to be a very interesting matchup. Look, I agree with you. MJF and Will Ospreay, fantastic match of the year candidate. And not, if I may, just real quickly, the reason why I feel that way is because it was a perfect modern style match. What do I mean? It's giving those crazy moves, but the guys are selling. They're selling that move took all that energy out of them, which is what I appreciate. It's what I'm used to. And so for those two individuals to go out there and to give us the best of both worlds, so to speak, the old school selling with the new school maneuvers and psychology, fantastic match. Absolutely awesome. Why it wasn't on or is not on All In is beyond me.
Well, the first time that they met, you're talking about.
Yes, the first time that they met, that should have been, I feel, saved for pay-per-view, but okay, fine. I don't think that's the worst booking idea that they have, thrown out there in the last few weeks. So, I mean, there's been a lot of other weird stuff that they've thrown out there, and you're like, what? Anyways, but I could see MJF and Will Ospreay having a series of matches. We're going to talk about a feud that, 35 years ago was very innovative. It was very impactful. These two, Will and MJF, could have had a series of matches just like a Steamboat Flair type of setup.
Absolutely. So it is, again, the most important match on the marquee as far as the drawing in power is the international title match, or the American title match, as has been renamed by MJF. Swerve Strickland is meaning Bryan Danielson there. But again, the focus and the spotlight is not on where I think it needs to be. I still, in hindsight, would have made sure that I would have plan this out where Will Ospreay defeats MJF at the peak, the top of the card, at a world championship level, because I just think that, when you have your marquee talent not competing for the top title, excuse me, it just seems like it's a miss. But again, it is what it is. Of course, Mercedes Moné, she'll be competing. She's not the world champion either. She is a secondary champion. She'll be competing against Dr. Britt Baker, again, taking the onus off of, not all the way off of, a world title match between Mariah May and Toni Storm, because that angle has been very good. Your thoughts on the women? I think it's more of a parallel between the storyline for the world championship, the ladies world championship in AEW, and the storyline that's going on for the TNT title. I think they've done, Tony Khan, we usually bash as far as his booking and things of that nature, or at least the public does, at least the pundits do, whatnot. I think he's done a good job in this case, feeding into the, I guess, disdain that they have for Mercedes Moné, and putting that on a par as far as with the returning Britt Baker, yet still making sure that the AEW World Championship is still something that is aspired to. And between the long running program that is now finally going to peter itself out at All In with Mariah May and Toni Storm. So I think they've done a good job there building those two programs side by side, as opposed to the men's, where it's clearly one over the other.
I'm going to disagree a little bit. I feel like the Toni Storm, Mariah May, that storyline has been done very, very well. I have enjoyed Toni Storm's timeless character since they started doing it. I've really enjoyed it. I think it's, yes, is it silly? Absolutely. But it's something that was different and refreshing. I'm not so sure with Mercedes Moné as to, I feel like they maybe should have pushed her right into a title matchup with Toni Storm. I just feel like she's floundering a little bit. I don't think with her having the TBS title that has helped any. Is it the worst booking of the women's division? No. Because I think that after these two programs, there's nothing booked for any other
There is
female.
nothing, not even at the ROH level.
No.
Although I like the Queen Amidala push finally, after losing for so many years. She's finally getting a push and has a chance for the ROH TV title, but that's separate. Outside of that, like you said, this is vast wasteland of just ladies competing against each other, and just 50-50 booking and things of that nature. So it's like you said, it's really not bringing anybody about as far as for contenders down the road. So I get with you on that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking right now, Chris Statlander and Willow Nightingale. What's going on there? They're on Dynamite, and then the next week they're not, and I don't know,
because they're involved with CMLL. Does that mean they're just gone to Mexico and that's it? And I think that you should incorporate that a little bit more closely. Yeah, I get what you're saying. I definitely get what you're saying.
And the bottom line is just what you said. If you're not building people here at this level, all right, then you're going to have the people, you're going to need to feed people to the top tier, and there's going to be this empty spot, if you will, of people that aren't really prepared and aren't ready to, ascend to that level.
And then you have the Elite that just came off the Blood and Guts, where they had to give up certain conditions because they lost the Blood and Guts match. I guess Darby Allin and Jack Perry. That match I don't really have an affinity for. I guess that's just me. But the Elite taking over as the next NWO style faction, taking over AEW, just that has been a miss in my estimation. And I'm really not excited for anything that they do. I mean, we talked about the history as far as the Young Bucks and that whole clique being together, not being as prominently, I guess, thought of by us as maybe some others think they should be. But I mean, they're the tag champions. Do they even talk about the tag titles anymore? I'm sure there'll be a tag title defense at All In. again, it's just this part where really the Elite, it started off with a hot angle that quickly fizzled out.
I think the Elite, if you look at, let me back up for a minute. If you look at the ratings, I think whenever the Elite are on, there's a dip in ratings. I think when Chris Jericho is on, there's a definite dip in ratings. I mean, for crying out loud, the fans are chanting, "Please retire." I mean, I don't have anything more to say than that. There are these individuals who are not paying dividends anymore, and you should not be focusing on them. They should be. I hate to be, again, going back to being old school, because I know I sound like the old man that I am, but when you are on your way out, you help to build new talent. And, I'll just throw it out there. You come up with any tag team, if they beat the Young Bucks, that should mean something. And right now, I don't know if you beat the Young Bucks, if that means diddly squat anymore. At one time, it was a big deal. Now, I'm not so sure. Or the same thing with Jericho. Or, I mean, some of these other individuals. I don't know what to say. I think that that particular storyline has floundered, but they keep trying to make it work. And at certain points, you got to just throw your hands up and say, okay, this is not working, move on.
Well, it is, of course, AEW's All In. If you're interested in hearing more about it, we can always talk about it. You can go ahead and hit us up, popculturegospels.yahoo.com, the PVDcast.com, or put your comments in below, and we'll go ahead and be able to share more thoughts as we get closer and closer to All In right here at the State of Pro Wrestling. But it is the State of Pro Wrestling. It is John Orlando along with me, Gerald Glassford. Thanks again for watching, listening. Truly appreciate it. It is the highs of AEW and the lows of AEW, but there's also the WWE as All In prepares itself for London, and as far as the big show that's happening there, SummerSlam. It's headed to Cleveland and see what happens there. Big show for them. A lot of things that are taking place, a lot of good angles. I know that our commentary, speaking of commentary, is going to sound like we're picking on AEW. We sound like every other show where we're picking on AEW, then praising WWE. WWE has not been perfect. The Wyatt 6 is like, it's not my thing, but maybe it reaches out to an audience that they need to reach out to. And if that's the case, that's a home run. There's some other things I could say, too, but there's some good stuff going on in WWE. Anything related to Cody Rhodes, he has proven to be a very marketable and very good, eloquent, well-spoken, very approachable champion. And I will give him a lot of credit for being out there in more ways than one, not just wrestling, but also as well, being out there for interviews and commentaries and podcasts and things of that nature. So I will give him credit for that. He is going to go up against Solo Sikoa. They've tried hard to make Solo Sikoa and the Bloodline faction a real threat. Obviously down around the corner, Solo Sikoa will be facing a returning Roman Reigns, and there'll be factions of the Bloodline facing off against each other, et cetera, et cetera. They're going to continue that bloodline probably past my bloodline, whatever that is. But your thoughts, have they done enough to Solo Sikoa to put him in the main event at SummerSlam?
I think they have. I have been very much impressed with this secondary, if you want to call it that, bloodline group. Mm-hmm. Look, I've said it before, and I'll say it again. It's like an old mob movie. You have the Godfather who's, got a set of rules, and he's got a code, and there are certain things you do and certain things you don't. And then he, for whatever reason, gets pushed out of the way, and the new young kid comes in, the heir apparent, who's going to do things his own way and disregard, all what the old groups has done. So I find it compelling. I like it. Is Solo Sikoa worthy of winning the title? No. Being in the main event? Yes. I say he's worked hard. He's shown that he's got some charisma to him. I think that he's going to be. I think this is going to be a good match. I think it will be. My only concern is how much does the bloodline get involved? Because we know that Tama Tonga, Tonga Loa, and Jacob Fatu, are going to get involved, but how much are they going to get involved is going to be my question. So that may impact my enjoyment of the match, but yeah, I think Solo Sikoa deserves a shot. Give him the ball and let him run with it. So far, he's done pretty darn well with it, so let's keep it going.
Also on the card, Damian Priest versus Gunther for the, I guess we'll say it, the secondary world heavyweight title. Again, I don't see a need for this title personally. Damian Priest, I'm just not into him as far as his character. I just, give him credit for getting the title, obviously working hard to get it, being the head of Judgment Day, et cetera, et cetera. Judgment Day, because of all the various things that are going on, seems to be kind of losing some steam as a group, as an entity, even though there are some parts of it that are still really, really good, which we'll talk about here in a second. But Damian Priest, I just never saw as at that level. Still don't to this day. Gunther, however, I still think the future is very bright for him. Coming off that record intercontinental title reign, I still see a great place for him at the top of the card at various points in time, if he's pushed and promoted correctly. Your thoughts on Damian Priest versus Gunther? This is a match that's, for most people is just there. But don't sleep on it. I think they could work out to have a pretty good match.
I agree with you. I don't think that they've done a lot to promote the match, because exactly what you said. It seems that Damian Priest, Finn Balor, Dom, they're involved in a bunch of different things. And I think that is watering down their storylines. But I think this is going to be a good match. And I am going to go out on a limb and say I think we might see the crowning of a new champ. Because I think it's maybe time for Gunther to step up and show that he is one of those true talents on the roster in WWE.
You see do you see a Money in the Bank cash in?
That's a good question. No, I say no.
Okay.
I don't think we do one just yet.
All right. Fair enough. But also on the card, CM Punk versus Drew McIntyre. This is the probably most eye-catching angle feud that's going on, and I love it because the fact it's not for a title. When you can have something that more people are tuning into, as evidenced by the ratings, then you're doing something right. That, because essentially this is, I'm not gonna say these are mid-carders, these are upper. Right now they're being treated as an upper mid-card at this point in time, because it's not a championship title. As far as that they're going for, it's just the fact that they were going in a challenge match with Seth Rollins as a special referee. I think they've done a very, very good job of focusing on this and feeding everybody that their secondary thought of as far as where they're at, because it's not for a title, is now at the forefront of because the sheer hatred, quote unquote, that they have for each other. Your thoughts on this matchup? I really like it, and I'm really excited for this match going into SummerSlam.
Oh, I like it too. I think it is probably a little bit predictable that Seth Rollins is going to get involved one way or the other. But this feud, kudos to Drew McIntyre, because a year ago I was bored with him. I was so over him and could care less. But he's really made me care. He's made me want to watch and see what happens. Every aspect of this matchup is been well done, from the sneak attacks to the promos to the, I don't know what more to say. It's just been fantastic, and I'm really looking forward to the match. And I think it might very well end up being match of the night.
Okay, there you go. Yeah, I think it will be a really good match. Be very heated. I hope they use the outside. That's one of the things I liked about MJF and Will Ospreay, is because they used all facets of the game: aerial, ground, and also brawling outside. I know some others didn't like it, but I love that aspect of that they use. I love that aspect as far as putting that into a match. I think it just provides variation, and I expect them to go ahead and use and go everything within there. And I think this is just a start between those two as far as in the ring, and I think it really, really makes for some very interesting watching. And I really think that it is something that a lot of people are focusing on as the biggest match coming into SummerSlam, as opposed to the championship matches. And to me, that is always something when you can do that. And I know we kind of squashed the AEW as far as promoting an international match stronger than their world title match. WWE, I guess you can say the same thing, but this is the most important match in the card, and it's not even one for a title. So maybe you should fault WWE for that as well, John.
Well, and the other thing is that you can say about this particular match is the same thing that they've always said in Memphis. Personal stories make money. And let's be honest, they've mixed that into that has made me, and I'm sure lots of other viewers want to find out what's going to go on with them. The whole storyline that Punk, 13 years ago was a jerk to a lot of people. I think that has added a layer to this match and to this situation, we'll say, between McIntyre and Punk. Again, you said it best. If you could have a match with high stakes and no titles involved, you've done a great job booking.
There you go. Absolutely, indeed. But I will say before we head to the break, our 30-minute break, I want to go ahead and touch on one last match, and that is LA Knight. Yeah, against Logan Paul for the United States Championship. And I have no confidence in WWE still, even as hard as they tried, as hard as they have tried to squash the LA Knight fandom, the LA Knight fandom still lives, and it's still pretty darn good. I'm assuming that they will not give him the title because they love Logan Paul so much, because of all the things he does outside of the WWE ring. He's pretty good in the ring for a guy that doesn't have much experience. I will give him that. But for all the YouTube stuff that he does outside of the ring, that's why they want to keep the title on him. I still think it's in their best interest to give it to LA Knight and let him go from there.
I think they give it to LA Knight. I do. I think they realize the time is now. Fingers crossed. And it's okay for Logan Paul to take the loss. It's okay for him. I mean, because you could just bring him right back. I want my rematch clause. Let him have a couple weeks off. He comes back, and he still wants to have the feud with LA Knight. And there's nothing wrong with that. I wonder sometimes that individuals that are in charge of creative, they think and make things too difficult. It's not that difficult. If LA Knight wins, again, a few weeks off, Logan Paul comes back, especially if LA Knight wins in a way that makes, Logan Paul look weak. Like if Logan Paul tries to use the brass knucks, he doesn't. LA Knight gets him. Kapow, hits him. He's got to build an excuse. Logan Paul's got the built-in heel excuse. Well, you use a weapon to beat me. I mean, again, this is simple booking. That's all you need to do is just keep it simple.
Once again, it is John Orlando from the PVD Cast and PVDcast.com, and also as well, of course, Smat Talk. Go ahead and check out John Orlando today at the PVD Cast and PVDcast.com. It is me, Gerald Glassford. Thanks so much again for watching and listening. Truly appreciate it. It's the state of pro wrestling right here for you. Just to finish up what's going to go on, we didn't want to leave the awesome ladies of the WWE ring out, especially because there is one really good storyline. We talked about the Judgment Day being lessened because of all the stuff that's going on between various parts of the Judgment Day. And I'm not even counting the tag title wrestling right now. Tag team wrestling seems to be, like in both companies, just like an afterthought at this point in time. And I'm just kind of disappointed by that. But that's another conversation for another day, John, on this show. We'll just go ahead and leave it for now. The part of Judgment Day that is really intriguing is the Rhea Ripley, Dominic Mysterio feud with Liv Morgan. And Liv Morgan, I guess, was not successful leading into SummerSlam and trying to woo Dominic Mysterio, who at this time is supposedly back with mommy, aka Rhea Ripley. But I have a feeling, since this is Dirty Dom, that the upcoming title match with Rhea Ripley and Liv Morgan, that they're not going to automatically give it back to Rhea Ripley now that she's back from injury. I have a feeling that Dirty Dom may play a dirty hand in the future for this title match.
So
John, are you with me?
wait. Are you saying that you think that Dom?
Okay, I got you back
Hello?
now. I got you back now.
Okay, I was gonna say I don't know what happened there. Are you saying that you think Dirty Dom's gonna turn on Rhea and go with Liv? Is that what you're saying?
If I was writing it, I would say yes. I
Oh,
would say yes.
okay.
I would say that's the idea, that he runs away with Liz after costing Rhea the victory. I think that would be the smartest booking angle as far as the concerns, because they both received shoulder injuries to each other.
Mm-hmm.
If that's the part they really haven't played up in storyline, is that they both gave each other shoulder injuries, which it's half truths right there. I really think they should go ahead and play this out for longer. This is their best women's angle right now. The women's pool right now is not that deep. Charlotte Flair, Asuka, they both have injuries. So I think that the way they've handled Belair and Jade Cargill, I think has been not that good either. I don't get it. I don't understand what they're doing there. So I really think right now that's the best thing they got, and need to play this out to at least Survivor Series. And in order to do so, I think Dirty Dom has to go ahead and run away with Liv Morgan.
Well, see, I think that it could be the accident. That Dirty Dom accidentally costs Rhea the victory, and then that could give us a couple more months of this love triangle, so to speak. But you know what? I mean, hey, I wouldn't say that your idea is not a bad one either.
Because
I
you got to
mean,
keep the heat on Dirty Dom.
right, you do, and I think he's going to keep that heat for a very long time. I think he's going to have that heat from the fans until he
That
decides.
mustache gives him the heat.
Oh God, that mustache is terrible, and the hair. The hair is awful too.
The
Let's not
mullet,
lie.
yeah.
The mullet is extremely bad. I think
Well,
Dom
hey, if
is
he has Liv Morgan, Rhea Ripley fighting for him, and he just got married in real life, who are we to say?
true, very true. Look, I think that they need to stretch it out to Survivor Series. However, they got to do that. If they go with the idea that Dom turns on Rhea, or that Dom accidentally screws up, either one of those scenarios, I think, would get them to Survivor Series, and then we can have the blow off between Liv and Rhea and Dom.
Last match I want to focus on, because again, the tag team turmoil, tag team title matches, whatever they're doing now in
Oh
both these
yeah.
companies, it's just a mess. It's just an absolute mess. But getting back to the last title I want to focus on is a title that hasn't been much focused on after the initial Bayley winning the Royal Rumble. I mean, she is really, her story and her character, as far as I think, has been going downhill. It was still popular enough to where she could win the title at WrestleMania, but I just don't see any enthusiasm for her character at this point in time. She was so much better as a heel, absolutely much better as a heel. I think that she needs to go back to being a heel, because her as a babyface just doesn't seem to get the crowd energized at all. And facing off against Nia Jax, you could say, is probably the best right now outside of Tiffany Stratton. I think Tiffany Stratton probably is the future for that title. But for now, it is Nia Jax. Where do you stand as far as Nia Jax versus Bayley?
Well, I think the problem with Bayley and the reason why her character's so flat, she has no one to work against.
Yeah.
I mean, let's be honest. We've seen Nia Jax and Bayley a million times. It's nothing new.
You know who I think they should push that's really working hard all over in both WWE and NXT? Michin.
I mean, I don't understand why that hasn't happened. I mean, they have
The woman flew through the ring and went smack face first into a chair for our amusement.
Look, I just feel like you got to find that perfect person for Bayley to work against, and I don't think at this junction in time they don't have that. Tiffany Stratton would be perfect, but even that I don't know. Like there's still some of that bubbliness. You need a big nasty heel for Bayley to get over with this character, and there's not one. I mean, you could say Piper Niven, but they've kind of shot themselves in the foot with her a bunch of different times. Chelsea Green is a comedy act, with all due respect to her. They've taken Stark, Baszler, and DeVille and put them together in a stupid 3-person team, which I don't understand what they're doing with that. There's just no one that they have. Again, this is like I just said about AEW. They haven't built anybody else. So we're stuck with Nia Jax and Bayley, which is boring and nobody wants to see it.
I will say, though, that it will be interesting nonetheless to see what happens and how good the matches are for WWE SummerSlam and also as well AEW's All In. If you have any thoughts you want to go ahead and share on All In or SummerSlam or what's going on with the state of AEW and the WWE, you can always let us know. The PVDcast.com, of course, popculturecosmos at yahoo.com, or leave it in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you on those outlets. But before we hit the break, my friend, and our final segment devoted to the best and worst in commentary, 2 things I wanted to bring up with you. Well, actually, I'll just bring up one because I'll save the one for the very last thing. 35th anniversary, 35 years ago, around this time, the climax of one of the greatest trilogies in pro wrestling between Ric Flair and Ricky Steamboat ended. I believe it was in Music City, Tennessee, if I'm not mistaken, their final one.
Yep.
Yes. So what happened was it was on a Clash of Champions in front of a live audience, and 3 judges were there just in case it went to a time limit draw, including Carl Gotch. I also believe Luthez and Terry Funk as former NWA world champions. And after the match, which Ric Flair won, Terry Funk proceeded to go ahead and get dissed verbally by Ric Flair and proceeded to go ahead and actually in a hardcore, very hardcore manner, take out, quote unquote, or at least send Ric Flair on vacation. As far as taking him out, which caused a great fervor for WCW, a lot of energy, and it all led to, after I believe a Great American Bash match, it led to the greatest match I've ever seen. Flair versus Funk, Troy, New York, for Clash of the Champions. Your thoughts on the 35th anniversary of the feud of Terry Funk and Ric Flair? A feud which was flamed out all too soon because the WCW just destroyed the JTEX Corporation, Great Muta, Terry Funk. They just did not let them win when they needed to win, and it fizzled out like that. But not until we got one of the greatest matches I will ever see in my lifetime.
Well, it was shocking for me as a fan because, as you maybe glossed over on purpose, I'm not sure. Maybe it was an accident, but Funk put a plastic bag over Flair's head.
Yes,
like
kind of glossed.
Yeah, that took me a step back. Like, holy cow, Terry Funk is a crazy lunatic. And then to that somewhat very awkward pile driver on a table, which
we had never seen before, at least
Yeah.
on a national format. I mean, Memphis had been done and some other venues been done, but not to that level as far as pile driving on a gimmick table.
Yeah, so I think that those two things really piqued my interest as a wrestling fan. And then for weeks, no one knew what was going to happen with Flair. Was he injured for good, et cetera, et cetera? And I remember vividly the Terry Funk interview from Saturday night where he was going to interview Ric Flair, and it was some jobber in a Ric Flair robe with the yellow streak down his back, and he's got a back injury, and how disgusted Jim Ross was at Terry Funk. This was an awesome feud. And look, I think that it might be bold of me to say, but I think that this was the start of maybe what we would see a few years later in ECW with crazy, middle-aged and crazy Terry Funk.
Absolutely. It was very hardcore for that time, for that audience. It was something that we didn't see. The reason why I think that match as far as the match with the I Quit match is just so revered to me is because of what they did in that match, as far as inside and outside of the ring. It was different. It was a different Flair match. It was not the same prototypical Flair match that you see with all the same spots you see throughout the course of what he did throughout the entire 80s. This was different. This was intense. The psychology was at an absolute high with two of the very best in way that they developed their psychology in the ring. It was just absolutely phenomenal. And the fact is, at that time as a kid, the reason why I revere so high is I didn't know about Terry Funk's willingness to do or say the I Quit. I thought absolutely it's one of the few times in my life where I came in there not thinking it was going to be something. I thought it was going to be a schmoz at the end, DQ finish or something like that. They would jump Flair and there you go, Sting or somebody saves the day up, end of story. Little did I know that Terry Funk would have the gall or the balls to, for lack of a better term, or the guts to actually say I quit on national television. And I thought that took a lot for me. It surprised me. One of the very few times I get surprised in watching professional wrestling, because as someone who watches and has seen quite a bit, I usually can see something coming a mile away. This I didn't see at the time in 1989. And I thought, wow, that was a great finish, and that's a great way to do it. And I just didn't expect it. And that's the match throughout was just fantastic. It flowed beautifully, and the way Tommy Young referee was providing the microphone right in their faces and asking for them to go ahead and I quit, and their responses back. And yeah, it was never, never, never. Terry Funk would say never, never, never. And then, yeah, absolutely. He ended up saying it. So yeah, definitely some great times and great memories of one of the greatest feuds of 1989 and throughout time in pro wrestling between Terry Funk and Ric Flair. You got two performers at the top of their game that inspired each other to greatness at that time.
Agreed. Absolutely. 100% agree.
Once again, it is the State of Pro Wrestling with John Orlando from the PVD Cast and the PVDcast.com, and also Matt Talk. It is me, Gerald Glasser from the Pop Culture Cosmos. Truly appreciate you joining us. But before we head on out, and before I ask John Orlando the most important question in pro wrestling right now, I will go ahead and get on to the homework assignment that he and I had, because you and I thought of something to go ahead and do to challenge our brains and challenge our memory banks and also challenge our YouTube accounts. And that is, who is the best and worst pro wrestling commentators that we have seen throughout our lifetime? So, without further ado, may I show it on the screen now?
Here we go. Let's go. I want to see what
show it on the screen now for all those to see. This is the scoring for us, and it goes based off of a 5-point system in 3 different categories for each and every commentator: ring knowledge, how they portray storylines in their commentary, And in the moment, like when something really bad happens to a wrestler or wrestlers, or when something really good happens to wrestler or wrestlers, like a title change, or somebody gets backstabbed, or somebody gets, not literally, of course, as far as jumped and betrayed or something like that. So that's what we're here doing today. So again, 3 different categories, 5 points each maximum. Let's go into numbers. First off, what were your thoughts when I first proposed this to you, and your thoughts when you went in and you looked back at all these different announcers?
Well, when you first pitched the idea, it was right before I took off for my first vacation of the summer.
Yeah, absolutely. To
And
Mazatlan, or I think it was Rio. I forget which one it was.
it was the West Indies,
Okay,
where
all right.
where the $1 Million Man has a house, in the
There you
Netherlands
go.
Antilles.
Yeah, don't get me started on the $1 Million Man right now, because they might be trying to take all of his homes. But
Yeah, well,
that's
anyways, no, I thought it was pretty. I was like, oh, it's easy for me. I can name off, like, I thought we were going to do like 10 or 12, and
we
then
could have done 10 or 12.
you up the ante to just however many, and I'm like, oh, okay. And I did go back to look at a few, like, for an example, because we had a conversation in our messages about Sean Mooney. Now, I remember Sean Mooney. I remember him from Event Center. I don't know if I remembered him commentating, though. So I was like, wow, that's a challenge for me, because I'm going to have to try to find some Sean Mooney to find out, because I didn't remember from a kid.
For me, it was easy, though, because I saw a ton of pro wrestling in the early 90s and the late 80s on the USA Network. So I saw a ton of matches that he called, because it would go from Bobby the Brain Heenan and Gorilla Monsoon right to the ring, and he would be calling it with Lord Alfred Hayes. So I got the chance. And then for me, on the opposite, there were other guys that you had seen quite a bit of that I had seen quite as much of as well.
Well, yeah, and that's what kind of made it fun. Even though I joked that I really worked my fingers to the bone on this, but I enjoyed it. It was fun to kind of research these folks. And now I think one thing that we should certainly talk to the folks watching and listening. There were some that were hard for me. You gave a couple of the New Japan guys and the All Japan guys, and I got to be honest, it was hard to grade them on their knowledge of storylines or
That's
knowledge.
harder. I get it.
Yeah.
I'd have to watch quite a bit of both, of the Japanese, or also remember, but I had to base a lot off it as far as the knowledge, especially when they would call certain moves at the time they happened. What were they about? As far as the Japan, I'd look in translations, but if they did do the Americanized word for them, then I was able to see as far as and understand as far as their timing is concerned of certain moves and things of that nature. So I got a little bit better on that. And plus, also, it's easier with Japanese wrestling because it is much less storyline focused and much more move and athletic and sport, aka reality based in Japanese wrestling. So that's their focus more on. So you need to be more knowledgeable on the moves at hand as opposed to storylines.
So did you have anybody that was perfect? That was a 15 out of 15 for these 3
No, I don't think I had someone that was perfect. I think everybody had some type of like, you're almost there, but you're not quite there. Like I know for you, Joey Styles,
Yep,
is your greatest commentator of all time. For me, he was tied as far as it's concerned. For you, he was a full 15 points, got a 5 on every scale. For me, he was a 14 on best on as far as just short on storylines. I think there's just been a couple of commentators for me that have compelled me a little bit more on storylines. But he does an outstanding job of that as well. So yeah, him and Mike Tenay for me are my number 1 picks. They're tied. So,
Well, and I think also too, I give credit where credit is due for Joey Styles. He did it by himself for a majority of ECW's
Yes,
run.
he had to be play-by-play and color analyst at the same time.
Yeah, yeah, and I threw in, I think my next one, and well, I have two. I have Mike Tenay was 13 for me. I think that Mike Tenay's some of his ring knowledge thought was really really good. I don't know about him being in the moment. My next two. So if my top three: Joey Styles, Dave Prazak, and Larry Matitzik, I believe is how it's pronounced. Larry Matitzik, I had to go back and watch some St. Louis wrestling, which was not a bad thing. It was very entertaining.
You and I
And
are way different on Larry Matisic. Way,
really,
that's our biggest difference if you look at it.
okay. Well, what do you?
I watched when I watched Larry Matisic. Yeah, I saw and he is a victim of the early 1980s and before wrestling commentators. Most of those guys, they're either promoters or they were like newsmen, radio guys, something. They were not born into as far as the wrestling vernacular, so they didn't have the wrestling knowledge that I felt that is needed as far as the wrestling vernacular is concerned. So you are way on the other
Wow.
end, and I respect that. But yeah, to me, when I went back earlier this week and watched more of what I've been, because I don't remember much of St. Louis wrestling outside of Bruiser Brody, so I went back and watched a substantial more amount of it, and I was just, he reminds me, I loop him in with all those other bad early 80s 70s and before pro wrestling announcers, because the pro wrestling announcing is bad. I think the best of the best is Gordon Soley, and you and I are going to get a ton of heat for this because Gordon Soley is so revered in the wrestling industry. Gordon Soley, and on our list, is not rated very high as well.
Well, based on the categories that we have, and I agree. I agree. I'm a huge fan of Gordon Soley, but he and Lance Russell really didn't know the moves. But
No.
what they excelled at was storylines, and especially Lance Russell. When he would get in the moment, he would be that, how do I want to say it? Like Jim Ross, like gets indignant and gets
Mhm.
angry, physically angry at the heel. And so for that, those guys, I agree, they don't have a lot of the in the ring knowledge.
Well,
There was
Jim Roth to me was the first guy to actually go out there and learn move sets and be able to call them on camera.
and there was somebody else, and I wish I wrote it down. I didn't write it down, but I watched. I don't even know the promotion, but it was somebody that I noticed the main event. They were very animated and they did a fantastic job. But if it was an early match, as they would say, our first contest here, it was, they were just lousy. It was like night and day, and it was the same commentary. Who was that? It's gonna drive me crazy now.
Well, I know before we head on out and before I ask you the big question, your thoughts on the world class guys. I don't have an issue at all because you actually gave zeros to some of those early 80s announcers, including Bill Mercer, which I would never argue on. In fact, I'm thinking that my 6 points that I gave him was actually too high compared to your 4. But I didn't give anybody a 0 like you did. I do have issues a little bit with Mark Lawrence because he is so animated. I think that's our biggest difference is not the moveset and ring knowledge, because again, I only gave him a 2 or a 1 on 2. I gave him a 2 on ring knowledge, but in the moment, could be, might be, it is screaming at the top of his lung as far as at middle of Texas Stadium. I just don't know how many other broadcasters could do better than that.
Look, it makes me sad to give Bill Mercer a 4 because he's a voice of my
Well,
child,
I'm not
but
sad about that because he's not that
but
good.
he didn't know the
He
moves
was
at
a
all.
news guy, by the way. Yeah, that
Yes,
did switch over. Yeah,
yes. Let's give him credit. I mean, he covered the Kennedy assassination in Dallas. I mean,
yeah.
but yeah, he was not very
When the
good.
Iron Claw does a better job, the replacement there does a better job of announcing than him. Yeah, that tells you
Yeah.
something right there.
And
Yeah.
look, I don't know what job was worse for Mark Lawrence, being a play-by-play guy or being the ring announcer, because he was dreadful as the ring announcer with his monotone in this corner, schedule in this corner, at 235 pounds from Arlington, Texas, Brian Adias. Like, he had that's why when you said he was animated, I'm like, are you sure we watched the same guy?
I'll have to send you over the Texas stadium videos and the reunion. Whenever he got a chance to commentate, I really saw much more emotion out of him. And plus, he was really good at recapping storylines, whether it was
Okay.
Eric Embry storyline during that USWA during the final days of World Class, or the Freebirds and Von Erichs. If you get a chance, you might want to rewatch that. But the ring knowledge again for those guys, there was that was substandard. But again, our arguments back and forth, we could go all day on. But I am going to post this at popculturecosmos.wordpress.com, and I'm also going to send you a copy,
Yep.
or you can copy and paste anytime you want for the pvdcast.com, so everybody gets a chance. And please, if you're out there, please let us know your thoughts on who the best and worst announcers you have heard in your lifetime. We'd love to hear it, either in the comments below, the pvdcast.com, or popculturecosmos at yahoo.com. Well, my friend, it's a great episode. But before I ask you the biggest question in pro wrestling, what's going on with the Matt Talk and PVD Cast shows?
Well, Matt Talk is every Sunday night live. We go through the Facebook page and a bunch of other channels. I mean, Twitch, YouTube. I'm not in charge of that. I got to give props to my partner Jason. He is a whiz when it comes to the outlets. And tip of the hat, I tell him all the time I appreciate it, because I don't know. It's one thing I don't do very well is all those type of outlets, but it's everywhere. And Sunday nights we're live. At 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, taking a look at an episode of Matlock, and we share our thoughts on it. We discuss, we even poke fun at it, because it's a cheesy 80s TV show. So of course there's going to be some things to laugh at. So every Sunday night, 8 o'clock. As for the PVD Cast, I just posted a brand new episode featuring a fellow podcaster from the Cleveland, Ohio area. His name is George G3. And his podcast is called Dueling Aces, and they talk a lot about sports, and they also talk a lot about wrestling. So we talk about the Olympics and about the NFL, and we talk about WWE SummerSlam. So it's a great episode. Definitely check it out at pvdcast.com or wherever you find great podcasts. And I'd like to piggyback on what Gerald said. Let me know what you thought about my ratings of the commentators. You can send it over John Orlando, pvdcast.com. If you want to email your comments, I should say, excuse me, or you can drop me a line over on the Facebook page at PVDcast, or Threads, or Instagram, all at PVDcast. And let me know if you agree or disagree with me on some of those ratings and rankings.
Last but certainly not least, the biggest question in pro wrestling, my friend. You've been puzzled and been asking me for a month now, trying to figure out what that is. It should be easy, my friend. It's the biggest question going on in pro wrestling. Do you believe in Joe Hendry?
I believe in Joe Hendry.
Yes, there you go. Absolutely. You do in Tokyo.
Don't get me
reason why we
started.
say this, well, for those out there, Joe Hendry, who is now flirting with NXT and TNA, going back and forth between those two groups, he has gained in such huge popularity, but his theme song has now hit the top 10 charts on Apple's charts and also regular charts around the world, in the UK, the United States, and beyond. It has become a phenomenon. He is getting the pop that most wrestlers dream about. Your thoughts, my friend, on Joe Hendry? Now that we mentioned his name, he should be appearing any second now.
He should be.
Yes.
I for the last 2 days I've had that song stuck in my head. So,
Mhm, mhm, mhm,
but look,
mhm,
it's
mhm.
it's a silly character, it's a silly gimmick, but God bless him, man. It's it's something. I'll just tell you that right now. It is something, and I hope it continues to grow and continues to entertain those folks in NXT and TNA. Man, I remember when Joe Hendry was over here for Ring of Honor, like in 2017 or whatnot, and he was just a bland British guy that wrestled. So to see that transformation is pretty cool. And yeah, I believe. I
I
believe.
believe too, my friend. I believe that this will take him far, and I believe that this is the latest hot thing. This is where LA Knight left off. Joe
Mhm.
Hendry has now taken that ball and is now going to be running with it. So we'll see how far it goes. Will it get him to the WWE? It certainly seems like
Mhm.
he is transitioning into that direction because he's been on NXT for quite a bit. And WWE, when they see a hot thing, they may cash in on it, but we'll see how soon that takes place for Joe Hendry. But yes, absolutely. Our own Joe Hendry is John Orlando. Please go ahead and check him out today at thepvdcast.com and, of course, on Matt Talk as well. Well, it's Gerald Glassford. Truly appreciate you joining us. We'll be back next month for another State of Pro Wrestling, talking about what's going on with AEW, WWE, Japan, Mexico. Who knows what we talk about? Joe Hendry, maybe again. We may be talking about anything going on in the world of pro wrestling right here on the State of Pro Wrestling on the Pop Culture Cosmos, PVD Cast, Matt Talk, and everywhere you find your great podcasts.